Welcome, guys, to this series of discussion on J Sai Deepak's seminal contribution to the decolonial literature. The man has put a dent in the Indian intellectual landscape, and he has become our voice, a voice of Dharmic perspectives. But we need more Sai Deepaks, more people to articulate our side of things in a smart and intellectual manner by using our philosophy and using Dharmic knowledge, so that we are able to effect change in the world which we have today. And it is for that reason that this is an effort to disseminate his and other similar works, so that we are able to fully grasp the intellectual matrix that has gripped us. I hope that I'll be able to explain his ideas easily enough and relate them to current happenings, so that you are able to articulate them further in your discussions on issues concerning our civilization, country, and culture. With that said, let's begin. The scope of this video is limited to the introduction and the first chapter of India, that is Bharat. We'll see why he wrote this book and jump straight into developing the terminologies required to understand this matrix better. Because you're watching this video, you should know that we've all started out like Sai Deepak, concerned at the state of affairs of Hindus in their only homeland and the negative effects that their internal fights are having. As is the case even today, he saw everyone rushing to preserve their caste or some other sub-religious identity. And this was costing the broader religious identity, which we all know is detrimental to the country and to our entire civilization, but it is something we've still not been able to fully cement. JSD realized that this internal fight, it was by design and it was created. It was unnatural. But that is exactly what needs remedy. Unfortunately for us, the intellectual consensus in the country, dominated by Nehruvian Marxists as it is, was unanimous in its assessment of Bharat's past and that of our socio-religious institutions. This assessment, it sees Indian society and culture as a degraded relic of the past, a past which is replete with discrimination and unfounded dogma. This view naturally takes them to the conclusion that the West is the zenith of human civilization, that its culture, society, institutions and intellectual traditions are the only viable method for human development, and that they must be implemented in every society. You must know that this is exactly how Western intellectuals describe the West as a set of institutional and intellectual models, and not as a geographical entity. Naturally, this belief has led to the blind implementation of foreign practices and foreign frameworks to Bhartiya society, the result of which has been the alienation of Bhartiya society from her culture. This design has a singular aim, and that aim is to keep us mentally enslaved. Because if we can't think for ourselves by ourselves, then how are we ever supposed to become a Vishwaguru? Or ditch that. How are we ever supposed to become a self-respecting country? It is for this reason that we've always been categorized as a soft state. Because people who want their internal matter of Kashmir to be solved by UN can never offer any solution to the UN. They are incapable of doing that. We are being recasted in the mold of the West and are being subjected to its institutional and intellectual traditions under a tried and tested template. A template which has yielded results in other societies. It gets argued a lot that this template has yielded favorable results, but our study, it will uncover a lot of that which does not meet the eye. You'll be able to show them the failures and incompetency of their model. And it is for this reason that a systematic comparison with other colonized societies is called for, so that we Bhartiyas understand this facade for what it really is. And this is where decoloniality as a framework enters. It is an intellectual breakthrough which enables colonized societies to understand their colonialization better. However, before we try to understand what coloniality is and what it does to any society, we need to understand how coloniality operates through us, the colonized society. Look at this article from the Wire's website, supporting the women seeking to break the Sabrimala temple's traditions and calling for the entry of all women in the temple. Evidently, it is inconceivable to her that Lord Ayappa is being treated as a juristic entity, having similar rights as do you and I, and also that of him being a Jagrut or a living formation of the divine. Moreover, she refers to him as an idol and not as a deity. Be that as it may, ponder with me for the following questions. Where is it that God gets treated as a formless divine? Where is it that he is inconceivable and unimaginable? A Nirakar Ishwar, that is, a formless divine, is certainly not the Dharmic Vedic tradition. If there is difference in the form of conception of the divine itself, isn't there bound to be differences in the modes of relating and connecting to the deity? That implies that the mental image of the divine in her head is in dissonance to the Dharmic image, and that this mental conception of a god in her head is akin to the Abrahamic God. And also, and this is very important, the morality and ethics being expressed through the traditions of the temple are alien to the woman. Writing in an English daily, this woman is obviously an educated and learned individual, but that kind of educated and learned who does not understand her own culture, her own traditions, or even her own people. This is the impact of a Western education, especially that of a Western moral and ideological education. An education which has divorced her from her own culture, her traditions, and her people. In short, this is coloniality. Having seen firsthand what coloniality is, this might be a good place to lay before you the definitions of some crucial terms. Coloniality. It refers to the thought process which leads to colonization. It is the intent of the colonizer. And as you'll see, this intent always extends beyond the mere economic exploitation of the colonized. Therefore, coloniality is the why of colonization. Colonization. It is the actual process of establishing a colony, inclusive of the political, economic, legal, and social structures of the colonizing society. Colonialism. The systemization of colonization is colonialism. That is, when colonization gets used as a process to further your footprint on the planet, the process is called colonialism. Colonialism is primarily of four types. Exploitative colonialism, the economic exploitation of the colonized society without settling down in the colonized society, but by using it as an economic resource to further your own economic progress, is called exploitative colonialism. Settler colonialism, the settling down of the colonizing society into the colonized society and the taking over of all aspects of the colonized society by destroying or altering their political, social, and economic structures is called settler colonialism. Surrogate colonialism, the usage of a dominant group loyal to the colonizer, ruling the colonized society on behalf of the colonizer, is called surrogate colonialism. This dominant group is usually from within the colonized society. Internal colonization, when colonization happens internally within the boundaries of a country, then it is known as internal colonization. You will see as we go forward that the first three are all applicable to Bharat. So guys, with basic definitions out of the way, these must be the new words in your lexicon. Colonization is the total subjugation of a society, a subset of which is colonialization. Colonialization is the subjugation of a society's culture, tradition, religion, and consciousness. So the next time someone tells you that we are not colonized anymore, you're going to tell them that we are still reeling from the after effects of colonization, that we are still colonialized. Now every society experiences the fount of colonialization, which is coloniality, differently. It is because coloniality gets enforced in each society to suppress the consciousness and subjectivity of that specific society. And since the cultures and consciousness of different native societies have been different, the experience of coloniality in each of these different native societies has also been different. What that means is that the way Bharat has experienced coloniality is different from the way Africa or Latin America has experienced coloniality. But that does not mean that the nature of this experience has been different. It has been similar. all of these native societies, their cultures, and their consciousness, it has been stereotyped and misrepresented. Now, because they've experienced coloniality differently, it naturally follows that their approach to decoloniality will also have to be different. What that means is that each of these native societies, whether that be in Africa, Bharat, or Latin America, or anywhere else, they'll have to define decoloniality for themselves, which means that decoloniality will have a plurality of definitions and it'll have different conceptions in different geography. So, the consequence of colonialization was that the colonized society increasingly adopted the perspective of the colonizer on every matter. And very soon, their traditions and their cultures, their religion and their consciousness were either transformed or lost, as they were increasingly moderned on the lines of the colonizer. Basically, what that means is, imagine it like this. Just as one can get over financial loss, but it takes decades to overcome trauma and depression. Similarly, your Tatas and Ambanis may buy up all British companies, but if you become British culturally, then the real winners are the British and not your country or her people, because you have essentially lost what it means to be you. Put simply, colonialization speaks of the loss of a colonized society's identity and its own unique expression. It alters their perception of time, thus colonizing their history and giving new meanings to their present, and therefore deciding for them their preferred future. It changes the ways of living and relating to each other and alters the way of organization and conduct of that society's internal affairs. According to Anibal Quijano, colonialization achieves this by handing out the thought frameworks of modernity and rationality. And you'll realize as we move ahead that these thought frameworks have been designed specifically to keep the colonized society feeling inferior and to create an aspirational aura around itself, that is, around the colonizing society. You may become free politically, but you'll still want to become like the colonizer, in taste and in sensibilities, in culture and in traditions, in attire and in attributes. See, you must realize that battles within society are almost always battles of perspectives. How you're looking at something is always more important than what you're looking at. You can construe a happy event as being depressing or a depressing life event as being the best thing that could have happened to you. At the societal level, this conception of good or bad happens through political ideologies. And then when you fabricate a thing in a manner that it is not in reality, you redefine and reconceptualize it. And then if you are able to create a coherent enough narrative of this reconceptualization of your reality, it just becomes a game of who shouts the loudest and who is in power. And if you are in power, then the way of achieving this is by destroying native institutions, and then by establishing your own institutions, implanting it into the psyche of the colonized. When native knowledge, traditions, and perspectives are eradicated from the memory of the colonized, all that is left is the colonizer's perspective on things. And since these perspectives or mental frameworks are designed to inculcate within you a feeling of pity and condescension for your own self, you develop what is known as a pitiful attitude for everything that is yours and start to embrace whatever you have been taught through that mental framework as aspirational. You want to become more advanced, more progressive, more modern, more woke. One must remember that the Europeans have enjoyed this said power for 5 centuries now, first as colonizers and then through Western imperialism. And within this gargantuan time frame, they've established their institutions and their perspectives the world over. And in the process, they've consumed local sensibilities and worldviews. This destruction and ostracization of knowledge centers of all other societies meant that only the European colonizers' perspective on things remained standing. And the important consequence of that was the colonization of time and space. What this means is that the events of history would now be noted in accordance with the colonizer's perspective of time. What that means is, according to them, when time started, when history started, is from when the history of all other societies will have to start. The natural result of this was the mythologization and eradication of native histories. And this is how European wars came to be known as world wars. And this is how modern history of the world is the history of the European continent. And it is through this that all social sciences have come to be monopolized by the West. It is as if the world did not know how to conduct her societal affairs or how to live in peace prior to the arrival of their Western master. So congratulations, you're in a Eurocentric world order, where Europe and North America dictate what is good and what is bad, what is right or what is wrong, and what geopolitical position is politically correct or incorrect. But most importantly, where Europe believes that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems. The genesis of this Eurocentrism has been laid in the 15th century, when Christopher Columbus set out to quote-unquote discover the new world, the non-Christian world. Since the voyage of Mr. Columbus has achieved such an exalted degree of prominence, scholars are debating its importance from four schools. The modern school. It believes that Columbus's voyage must be seen as a glorious and heroic achievement, that it was an event through which the world had been set upon a path of progress and development. And they also believe that it must be looked at as an achievement which marks Christianity's destiny to liberate non-Christian societies from their barbaric existence. Yep, you heard that right. The entire world was barbaric before the white man came to civilize us. The gravity of this will become apparent in the chapters to come. And then you'll see how we've been brainwashed left, right, center about everything. The postmodern school. They oppose the modern school from different perspectives and try to counter the argument that the voyage was either glorious or heroic. However, the problem with the postmodern school is that it is constrained by the plurality of its positions. They do not give a single position. The post-colonial school. Now, this is perhaps the second most difficult school to understand. They recognize that things don't need to be the same everywhere and that they can differ in different places. But they don't realize the premise and the framework under which everything is operating. They're about to understand the matrix, but they haven't quite reached there yet. The decolonial school. These are the people who've understood the matrix, and that is why they question the very edifice on which everything is standing. To illustrate this school and bring out the differences with the post-colonial school, let's take the Sabrimala case itself. The Shirur Mutt judgment of 1954 drew up the requirement of essential religious practices, which was used by the petitioners to demand the entry of women in the temple. Now, if you were a post-colonial, you would oppose this argument by trying to prove the essentiality of the ban for the religious nature of the temple, and upon which the opposing side would defeat you by bringing up the equality and discrimination on the basis of gender arguments. In fact, this is exactly what they did. Now, for the decolonials, however, this entire line of argument is itself irrelevant, because if you know about the essentiality doctrine, you'd know that it requires a defendant to prove that a practice is essential by providing a written or a scriptural evidence for the same. Now, for a religion like Hinduism, governed by myriad laws and customs, everything does not have a basis in a written book. We're not Islam or Christianity, where everything emanates from a textbook. That is why this logic is entirely flawed in the case of our religion. And you'll say, to use JSD's famous words, that secular logic must not be applied to religious places, because you'll not like the application of religious logic to secular places. That is to say, that to search for a written scriptural evidence for a practice in Hinduism is a flawed metric, because that is not necessarily how Hinduism conducts its affairs. And so you'll make them realize that both the essential religious practices doctrine and equality are flawed metrics of judging Hindu practices, that they are just not applicable as far as Hinduism is concerned. And in the process, you'll realize that decoloniality, just like coloniality, is a state of mind. It's a way of looking at the world. The only difference being that coloniality is the colonizer's state of mind, which you've been enslaved under, whereas decoloniality is your own culture's state of mind, your ancestors' way of looking at the world, the Dharmic way. To put that under academic definitions, decoloniality seeks to reclaim the agency of colonialized people over their human affairs. It is a way for them to legitimize their subjectivity, their perspectives, and their intellectual traditions as a valid mode of thought amongst the universalized absolutisms of the West. Decoloniality is a nascent school, and it has disproportionately focused on the racial element of the European colonizer, despite there being evidences of religious foundations of coloniality. It is here that much work needs to be done by us Bhartiyas, because it is only us who can fully present the religious nature of coloniality, because all other regions of the world which have experienced coloniality have lost to the colonizer, and they have almost completely been converted to the religion of their colonizer. And therefore, there is no incentive for them to investigate the religious nature of coloniality. In fact, there is sufficient disincentive for them to do so. So guys, we'll have to take the baton ourselves. At long last, we have an intellectually accepted framework through which the defense of our civilization and her ethos is possible. We have hitherto been stereotyped and humiliated, and we have been told that there is nothing from our culture that can be brought to the contemporary world. Whereas the Western civilization, it still teaches, debates, and ponders upon Plato's thoughts. Whereas we were not even aware about how our ancestors used to think, what they used to think, or what their intellectual traditions were. That means that till the time we don't invest in our intellectual traditions, until the time we don't understand how coloniality is eating us up and is destroying our originality, we'll not be able to look at the West face to face and counter them intellectually on any societal, religious, political, or any other issue. We'll be stuck trying to prove the merit of our scriptures without understanding how we are being held hostage. We'll try to keep defeating the sword without amputating the hands which are holding them. So join me in this endeavor and start fighting coloniality in your limited ways. Raktabij might have been a demon, but today we need to become like him. When each one of us will present original thoughts and perspectives in our own limited ways, we'll change debates and we'll change discussions, and eventually we'll change the entire nation. This channel will help you to do just that by bringing out literature which will show you how we've been indoctrinated and fed lies about our culture, our religion, and our past. So let's embark on this journey together and reclaim India, that is Bharat.